Hey everybody, this is Celtics Roundtable on the Boston Celtics newsfeed. Matt Ignal here. I am joined by Jonathan Levy, Lucky's Pipe, and we are also thrilled to be joined here by the NCAA and NBA expert Cole Zwicker. So our last podcast never made it to the airwaves. It was made obsolete by the ridiculous and unexpected Paul George trade. To recap, Paul George was traded before free agency even started for Victor Oladipo, who is on a shaky contract at best, and the second-year player, who perhaps isn't that promising, Domantas Sabonis. So the general sense is that the Celtics, in order to make the math work, their plan was to sign Gordon Hayward first using cap space and then trade for Paul George. Woj reported that the Pacers were asking for some combination of Crowder, Smart, and a few first-round picks, but the general sense is that the Brooklyn pick and the Lakers-Kings pick wasn't involved there. So now with Blake Griffin returning to the Clippers, the Celtics' only way to salvage their offseason now is to convince Gordon Hayward to sign with him. And as we know, this is the last year where they'll have real cap space, probably at least, until Al Horford comes off the books in either like 2019 or 2020, depending on if he opts into that final year of his contract. So, Cole, the way this looks to me is that the Celtics must have thought that they were getting both Gordon Hayward and Paul George. They would sell Hayward on the idea that they would certainly beat the best offer on the table to land George, and that they would then have a big four that was probably every bit as good as Cleveland, if not better. It was constructed in such a way to have a puncher's chance to take down Golden State. That pitch isn't quite as good now. And, maybe this will wind up being a blessing in disguise. As we talked about on this podcast, they would have to, gut the roster long term to make all the salary math work. And Paul George might have left. So who knows? He might have bolted to L.A. But, given that this harms the Gordon Hayward pitch, this kind of seems like a case of Indiana's total incompetence here, winding up kind of screwing over the Celtics here. But, I guess they couldn't pass up on the idea of getting Oladipo. Does this make a lick of sense to you, Cole? How are you trying to rationalize this?
This whole thing is just pure chaos. I mean, Woj just went on the jump and said that the Celtics never made a formal offer back to Indiana when the Pacers went to Boston before agreeing to that Oklahoma City deal, which really stunned everyone. I mean, just to start there, Oladipo is making his extension kicks in at $21 million a year, flat rate, and he has not shown the ability to play at that level yet. Apparently, there is some allure with his Indiana roots, going to University of Indiana, going back to the Pacers. And, they clearly valued him a lot more than I think that the general public does. Sabonis is another guy who might be a rotation player in the league, but I don't see any kind of high upside with him as far as, especially defensively, he's not going to be able to survive there against most lineups. So it really just stunned everyone. I mean, that was a trade that clearly the Pacers were looking at all these deals and they wanted to move immediately for some reason and not wait for Boston to kind of get their ducks in a row with the Paul George implications and free agency, the Gordon Hayward implications. So it was really bizarre. We don't really know what rumors are true. We get a lot of, Indiana didn't want to trade Paul George to any Eastern Conference team, didn't want to trade him to the Lakers to get his way. So it was really just a Western team that was on the table. So there's a lot of conflicting reports, but it sounds like Woj definitively said at least that we know, and Zach Lowe corroborated this on Twitter, that we know that Boston did not give Indiana a formal offer because of what you said, the order of operations with Gordon Hayward in free agency. But yeah, it definitely screws over the Celtics. I mean, if they're going to make a move this free agency, it's going to have to take multiple stars to do it. And now you're really all in on Gordon Hayward, and that's not really going to move the needle against the Cavs.
Yeah, so I mean, Wick Grousbeck and I think maybe Danny Ainge is they've reiterated this idea that Boston is not just one but two stars away. And, they might wind up getting zero. Jonathan Levy making his return from World Series of Poker, right?
Yeah.
What, in your opinion, what's the major implication for the Celtics here?
Well, first of all, I think it's important. We always talk about how the Celtics need stars, and they clearly do, right? They need guys who truly move the needle, like we're saying. But we always, I think, have overestimated how much these guys really go for. There's been 4 major stars traded in the last half a season or so now, starting with Boogie Cousins to Paul George here, also including, of course, Chris Paul and Jimmy Butler. I mean, what's the biggest return anyone's gotten? I guess it's Jimmy Butler, maybe Zach LaVine, Chris Dunn, and the number 7 pick. I mean, these guys are going cheap. So maybe it's not as hard to get a top 25 player as we're thinking. I still got my eyes on Boogie Cousins, by the way. I'm shocked that Indiana did not ultimately wait to at least let the Celtics get Gordon Hayward and then kind of need Paul George, right? Once the Celtics got Gordon Hayward, that they were going to be able to extract a bit more from the Celtics. By the way, certainly Jay Crowder and Avery Bradley, forgetting about the 3 first-round picks, is worth more than Oladipo and friggin' Domantas Sabonis. Let's get it together, people. Also, Kevin Love would be worth more than that. That would have been an easy deal to make. They could have gotten Gary Harris in a protected 1 from Denver. That's better, too. I don't know why Kevin Pritchard cares if Paul George is in the Eastern Conference for one more season, because who cares? He's going to LA anyway, and Indiana's going to be terrible anyway. None of it makes any sense to me, except maybe they really believe, much like Vivek loved Buddy Hield, if they really believe in Oladipo and or Sabonis, because this Indiana ties thing is stupid too. Who cares where he went to school? No one's going to care a year from now if he was a Hoosier or not. They only care right now because they have some happy nostalgic memories. It's not enough. So they must think they know something that no one else knows, much like Danny when he traded down for Jason Tatum and the rest of the world sort of, rolled their eyes. Now we're doing that at Indiana too, right? Except I believe in Danny Ainge. He at least has a track record for this stuff. I got nothing else.
You're coming with the fire today, man. Woo!
That was great.
It's kind of funny that like they're 2 for 2 for like maybe supposedly teams trading just because or highly because they want to get him out of the Eastern Conference. Like that's just like, I mean, it sucks for the Celtics, but they could also swing it to Hayward, maybe sell it as, hey, look at all these guys that just left the Eastern Conference. Here's an All-Star appearance. We just gifted to you. Come to the East. Be on a 1 seed.
I mean, but it's like it's bad though. Like Boston, like they can now only sell him on like being a very good team, but not great. Like they can tell him like, hey, you now have
like Miami's like
money, lifestyle. I mean, but like what's Boston going to say? Like we now have the opportunity to pounce if like a top 15 player like shakes loose. But who is that player going to be? Paul George and Jimmy Butler just got traded. Blake Griffin just signed a massive 5-year deal. That's an extremely shaky contract. Giannis and Karl Towns are going nowhere. There's no reason to think that Anthony Davis is going to be available anytime soon. I mean, there's always the chance that someone shakes free. Yeah, but it's not going to be enough to sell Gordon Hayward. And like we said, like Miami can offer more money because of no state income tax. So can Utah because of what they got. What is that? Is that fall under bird rights?
Yes. Yeah. Utah can pay him a 5th year for sure.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Right.
And 8% raises. Yeah, over 5%.
Okay. Exactly. Right. Even though Boston's going to offer 3+1, I mean it would be close, but Boston, monetarily speaking, is in 3rd place there. So now you got to figure instead of Boston being the odds-on favorite for both Paul George and Gordon Hayward, it's probably more likely than not right now that they get neither. So it's like, okay, now what? Do you want to get a 2nd-tier free agent? Do you just want to re-sign Kelly Olynyk and call it a day? Do you want to renegotiate and extend one of their players? I mean, for me, like big picture wise, if they don't get Hayward, and again, let's keep in mind that the front office has reiterated that they are 2 stars away and they're capped out for a couple of years until Horford comes off the books. You might think that if they don't get Gordon Hayward, the Celtics should probably really commit long term towards the path of building for 2020 without really a puncher's chance of building a contender right now. I mean, they were kind of doing that, but there was also kind of the option to contend now without giving up their window in the next decade. And that was looking pretty good, at least for my opinion, until late Friday night. How do you see this, Cole?
Yeah, I think the most fascinating thing for me is this really sheds light on the fact that maybe they didn't think that there was a talent gap between Markelle Fultz and Jason Tatum trading down, because if you amass that extra asset to move, they didn't show enough urgency to where they thought that, we're going to treat that solely as an asset to move for a star caliber player. It was like they seemed content now that Jason Tatum was on that same talent level as Fultz. So that was kind of the biggest takeaway for me right away, was that their evaluation of him was as a number 1 caliber talent in this class. I think that's a reasonable read on the situation. I disagree with the evaluation. I like Tatum. I don't think he's on Fultz's level of a prospect. But yeah, they're kind of spliced in their building term right now, because they have their established players are established now and ready to go now, but they're more supporting cast, number 3, number 4, number 5 guys on a title team, not the number 1 and 2. And then they have Tatum and Jaylen Brown kind of waiting in the wings, who have that next era ready. So they're in a nice position where they can manage both, but they're not really good enough now to really capitalize on that. So really, I look for them now to really try to move and align their core with those younger guys and try to exceed in the future, especially if they can't get Hayward. I mean, that seems like the reasonable move to me, to move on and try to build for the future if you cannot get Gordon Hayward. If you can get Hayward, then you still have enough assets to potentially flip for another star caliber player should one arise. I don't think that doesn't happen very often. I think that's the overstated part of this, is that stars don't become available very often. So the opportunity to get these three in this free agency period is a kind of an outlier scenario. But I think overall they're going to be able for the future if they don't get Hayward, and that's kind of my read on it.
All right, everybody, I want to tell you all about HelloFresh. It's the meal kit delivery service that makes cooking more fun so you can focus on the whole experience and not just the final plate. Each week, HelloFresh creates new, delicious recipes with step-by-step instructions designed to take around 30 minutes so that everyone, if you're a novice, if you're a seasoned cook, it doesn't matter. You can make tasty meals even if you're short on time. HelloFresh sources the freshest ingredients measured to the exact quantities needed so that there's no food waste. They also employ 2 full-time registered dietitians on staff, review each recipe to ensure that it is nutritionally balanced. They deliver food right to your doorstep in a recyclable insulated box for free, and they are now offering light spring meals and have just introduced breakfast options. Now, the loyal listeners of CLNS Media will get a very special offer. Get this, because you are a loyal listener to the Boston Celtics newsfeed, use the promo code BEAT30 for $30 off your first week of HelloFresh. Again, support the Celtics Roundtable and try HelloFresh for free. Simply visit HelloFresh and enter the promo code BEAT30. Sorry, that's HelloFresh.com. All right, now back to the roundtable. I mean, Levy, this is what you wanted all along, to just build around like the youth movement. I was getting excited about contending for a decade plus. It's looking pretty unlikely now, but anyway, what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, look,
youth movement? What do they got to do to do that?
First of all, getting Gordon Hayward is nice and makes it fun and makes it more fun to be a Celtics fan, but it still is like you're the skinniest kid at fat camp, right? You're not winning anything. It's like the runner-up in the Miss.
But you could then get a 4th star.
You got no chance to Miss Universe. You cannot really win anything. So it's nice, but it's not a big deal unless you get that extra star. Boogie Cousins, I'm just saying, free agent in 1 year, maybe going to be available in February, really cheap. But even without that, even with that, can you truly challenge Golden State? I question it. This team is really, truly built, I agree with you guys, for the future, not for the now, even though the now looks pretty. Let's just pretend we didn't get Isaiah Thomas and we didn't sign Al Horford and we're like a 42-win team. We'd be very excited about building for the future, right? We just aren't there yet. Lucky, do you agree with me or am I crazy?
No, I mean, I think it's pretty fun to, the reason I would still, sign Hayward, even though, you can't do the Paul George Hayward combo, is because they're a 1 seed. Maybe they're a bad 1 seed or whatever, but they're still in the conversation of the top in the East, and they can just add a player to that and then still hope for improvement out of everybody under 25, like Smart and Jalen and Jason. So I'm into that, and then hopefully one of those guys become all-stars and then keep going up.
Well, I mean, yeah, I think they'll need more than one to truly want to be a contender down the road, or for have one to turn it into a true cornerstone, a true superstar in the NBA, maybe a transcendent talent. But it's not just those guys. They got the 2018 Brooklyn pick. They got the 2018 Lakers pick that might be the 2019 Kings pick. They got the Memphis pick, which is looking pretty darn good. It's looking like that's probably going to be a lottery pick one way or another, unless Memphis is really good, or at least if Memphis doesn't decline in 2019. So they do have options there. But I don't know. It depends on how. We'll talk to Cole in the next podcast a little bit more about Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, and if he thinks that either of those guys have the chance to get there. But if the Celtics are going young, that might be taking a hard look at Avery Bradley, for instance, and seeing if you can get out of his contract and maybe get something in return for that with his free agency coming up, and the thought of paying both him and Isaiah $20 million plus, maybe perhaps maxing out his head is a little bit questionable. It's just kind of interesting to think about what a true youth movement for the Celtics would entail.
I mean, bye Isaiah Thomas means that, right? You're probably not going to pay that $20 million a year if you're going young.
I mean, you could make the argument that Isaiah because he's the only guy who could get into the paint right now. They didn't draft Markelle Fultz. That he's just sort of a necessary piece.
Nifty footwork. Jason can get in the paint, slice it up.
Maybe.
I mean, the number 3 pick in next year's draft and the number 1 pick combined, Michael Porter Jr. and Doncic. When you add those guys to this team, maybe you just feel like Isaiah. You don't need him as much. You can get more.
Sure, we're just gonna be crossing our fingers for that. Cole, if you were Danny Ainge, would you sell off some of the players on their roster right now? Assuming they don't get Hayward.
I think you'd have to think about Bradley, right? Because he's up for extension or a new contract next year, and it's probably going to be pretty high. I mean, it's going to be above league average for a starter, so it's $20 million range. You have Jalen, you have Tatum. I would maybe look to move Crowder if it was a really good deal, but his contract is just super valuable. I would not part with that yet unless it's like going to be like a star caliber trade. But yeah, I think overall you have to start looking at guys in some respect. I agree with your Isaiah point that like if you trade him, they just have no fulcrum offensively that can really do anything. Like with the ball, I mean, teams just kind of switch like we saw Cleveland do with Isaiah went out, and it was like switching every screen with Marcus Smart, Avery Bradley, and those guys aren't really like high level creators. So you can make an argument that paying Isaiah Thomas a max contract would be ill-advised to a rebuilding team. I totally get both sides of the argument. That's going to be a really fascinating one for me.
All right. Well, I mean, it's definitely not a done deal. Like Gordon Hayward doesn't come to Boston. This is airing Sunday, so he is meeting with the Boston Celtics today. So we want to keep our fingers crossed that the Celtics can at least have a really good team for now, and maybe just be just 1 star away from at least being like a weak contender. So anyway, I'm Matt Ignal. That was Lucky's Pipe. Jonathan Levy. We were joined by Cole Zwicker. Where can we find you on the interwebs, Cole?
At Twitter, creatively at Cole Zwicker, my full name. I write for the Step Back, do some draft coverage there, and then host the What's on Draft podcast. And we're going to get to a episode on 2018 draft tomorrow, so that'll be something that will interest Celtics fans, even though that top one or that pick is number 1 protected. So they're looking more in the 2 to 5 range because that's what the pick they would convey. So yeah, be on the lookout for that.
Every time I hear that top 1 protection, like
I can still get 2 top 5s.
Read it on my face.
2 top 5s.
Right.
All right. Yeah.
First ever.
So we're gonna have Cole on tomorrow. We'll be previewing Summer League, and we'll talk a lot about Jason Tatum. We'll give his breakdowns of Shemi Ojeleye, Kadeem Allen, Jabari Bird, maybe a little Ante Zizic and Jaylen Brown if you're lucky. So give us a follow on Twitter at CLNS Roundtable. A 5-star review on iTunes really helps us out. We want to thank you all for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.